Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Education Concierge Podcast Season 6. You guys already know that we're having the disruptors, dismantlers. We have people who are transitioning teachers. We have people who are transitioning out of this part of education into this part of education, and we are excited about it. We don't just talk about it here. We are about it here. Okay, we are here to equip you to be that educator, to be in that education space for the 21st century and move into the 22nd century. I don't know if we can call it that, but that's what I'm calling it. My guest today is Chandra Orrill. Did I say it right this time?
Yes.
Yes, because y'all know how I was stickler on saying people's names correctly. Now, ma'am, welcome to the podcast family. We love you. You are now part of the family. I am a good old country girl from Lawrenceville, Virginia. Shout out to the Bulldogs. I love y'all. And in the country, you know, when you come over the house, the third time you are considered family. So you have to make your own plate and get your own glass of sweet, cold, sweet tea. Because who makes unsweet tea? That's like, no. But today, because it is your first time and you're just joining your family, please introduce yourself to us and tell us, how'd you get into this education thing?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I'm super excited to be here. So I am the executive director of Rethink Learning Labs, which is a part of Rethink Learning, a nonprofit dedicated to transforming education. Rethink Learning Labs is all about doing research and bringing research to practice and thinking about the ways that research can transform education. And my trip here has been very interesting. I started out interested in computer music and then interested in multimedia. And I went to graduate school for multimedia design and development and got interested in school reform because I realized I had gone to school as an honor student and still had a pretty terrible experience. No offense to my past teachers. But it's like, if that's the best that they have to offer, because, you know, the honor students tend to get the best that's offered, what were the other students getting? And it started to drive me to want to change the system and to see the things that I could have experienced as a student that I was never able to experience. And from there, I ended up focusing my research on teacher professional development. And my second job out of grad school was at the University of Georgia as research faculty. And there I got interested in math education. And for 20 plus years now, I have been a math educator working with upper elementary and middle school teachers to help them teach math in much more interesting and research-based ways.
So thank you, because I am that student who hated math and realized as I became a teacher that I didn't hate math. I was confused and horrible until high school, where I met teachers who are probably, I don't know, they weren't trained by you because we were in different places and spaces, but I know that you trained teachers to be like the teachers I had, where they broke it down and they made me understand without like force feeding it. It was just like, hey, I'm a little girl who likes to read. This algebraic expression is a sentence. And I was like, it is? And when she showed that to me, I was like, it is a sentence. And it just, I was like, oh my goodness, I can do math. But nobody was like breaking it down so that I could grasp it.
Right. I remember the moment that I became a math educator. I was at a school board meeting with the person who was leading the main grant I was working on at the time. And his name was Jim Wilson. And he was up in front of the school board trying to help them understand why they should adopt the professional development project that he was leading. And he pulled up a program called Graphing Calculator, which allowed the creation of dynamic visuals for what was going on. And he did just simple coefficients. So ax squared plus bx plus c. He showed what A does. He showed what B does. He shows what C does. And I watched in that meeting and went, I was robbed. Nobody ever told me that there were patterns. Nobody ever told me that it could be understood. Nobody ever told me anything like that. And I was like, I want to make sure that that never happens to kids.
Thank you.
Kids can understand it.
Thank you. Because this is what true education is about. And so your path to where you are now, because you said you started with music.
Yep.
And but music and math are similar. And that's why it's essential, hint, hint, to keep the arts in school. Okay, back to our regular program. And so I love what you said, which is something that I've heard several of us honor kids say as now that we're adults. We were like, well, what were they doing in the regular classes? Because what was happening? Because now that we're older, you're right in and when you're in the education system, you're looking and you're like, okay, that's great, but is this really our best? And I can't speak on AP classes. They were just coming along when I was in the 1900s. So they were just coming along, and I think I only had like 2. So it's not like the AP classes they have now, where you can, you go in and you're like a sophomore in college. They were just beginning that. So here you are at University of Georgia, research professor.
I was a research assistant professor at that point.
And you're like, something has to change. And so how did you get from there to Rethink Learning Labs?
So I spent almost a decade at University of Georgia doing the research that I was doing, working with a lot of teachers in a lot of school districts. And I started becoming more interested in being a part of teacher preparation, which led me to UMass Dartmouth, which was my more recent position. And I've been here, I was at UMass Dartmouth for about 13 years, helping to start first a math education PhD program and then a STEM education PhD program, and doing some teacher preparation work in there to help the next generation of researchers be able to do the same kind of research that I was doing. And what I started realizing was that I was being pulled further and further away from the things that fill my soul, which is working with teachers and having teachers have those aha experiences. And so I was just super excited to work with the owner of Rethink Learning, also owns a professional development company called Eduscape. And I had been working with Eduscape on some projects for several years. And I was very lucky to be allowed to open Rethink Learning Labs under his business to do this. And he's as dedicated as I am to bringing research to practice. He's not a researcher though, so he's thrilled to be partnering with researchers to do this work.
Oh my gosh, I love this. Okay, so I'm gonna back up a little bit. How do I say this nicely? I can't. It's important. Professional development of educators to be intentional, and that's what I hear you were doing.
Right.
It was very intentional, and so I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about interventionists, and we were talking about how we know we have students with learning gaps. I don't know about learning loss, because did you really learn it? Because if in order for you to lose something, you have to actually have had it.
Yeah, I feel like I could do a whole TED talk on this idea of learning loss and how ridiculous it is.
And we will, and we shall. We shall. I love that. Oh, yes. I'll put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that. And I said, well, there was a gap. So like, even for me, and I was listening to you, and you were saying how the professor was explaining to the school board, and that's how I had my math teaching. That's actually a summer school class, because I had to take the math class over. And she broke it down so easily. And so what would be, if school just started here, and it started in the United States. Some people have been in school for a minute. Here in Miami-Dade, they did 2 days. So next week, I feel like it's their first full week.
Right.
You have new teachers. We have teachers who did the, I call it career switcher programs. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology.
Right.
So what would be a piece of advice to say to them as they're walking into the classroom and realizing that, I have a range of math learners or ELA learners, science and social studies learners in this class? What would be one piece of advice they could do for themselves? Because we can't always depend on our schools to necessarily help us immediately. I'm saying like that.
Right. I think if I could only give one piece of advice, I would say go to YouTube and learn how to use drawing representations or visual representations, because the thing that helps people understand math is being able to see math and being able to point at it. So when we're talking about it, we're not saying, well, if you move that over there and put it with that, then it all works, right? So if I actually have a visual where I'm like, if you take this piece right here and you move it over here, then this is the thing that happens. Suddenly it has a whole different meaning, even without getting more precise in math language, which is, of course, is also important.
So math language, go to YouTube. I will post what she said.
Yes.
Where she had to go in the notes. That's essential. And I was sitting here when you were saying, and I was like, yeah, because in elementary school, we have those manipulatives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you, like the teacher, she already knows. She just put the box on my desk. I'm a hands-on. She was like, my students will laugh at me. And I told them, I said, I'm not embarrassed. I said, like we'll be sitting in class, for testing. They'll be like, you start the testing at 1:15 and you have 15 minutes. And I'm sitting there on the board, like working it out. But I'm doing like this, counting. And the kids are like, aren't you the teacher? You too old to be counting on your fingers. I'm going to tell you something. Do you want this to be right or you want it to be wrong?
Right.
Do you want all your time? And finally, one of my boys one day, he said, I appreciate that you said that you weren't ashamed or embarrassed that you were still counting on your fingers. And I said, math is not my strong thing. I use what my teachers gave me to manage math.
And what I always tell people, because teachers get so worried about students who count on their fingers, I'm like, if you're going to choose something, fingers are a pretty good choice because they are always with you.
Always.
I don't have a problem with kids using fingers. Some of them use it as a place marker. Some of them count on them. They're always with you. So why not use a tool that you know is always going to be there for you?
What? Educators, stop telling, look, when they're reading like this, it is okay. Do you know why? Because I see my 78-year-old daddy doing that because he's trying to track the words. And I know he knows how to read. Sometimes
exactly.
It's a sight thing and it's a motor skill. We're going to leave these kids alone. We're going to let them use what we've taught them to use. It doesn't matter about age. Okay. So we are now in Rethink Learning Labs.
Right.
Okay. How is this? Because we always talk about disrupting and dismantling.
Right.
And, we both of us have been on and we are part of design to disrupt. Right. So tell us at Rethink Learning Labs, how do you design to disrupt?
So what we're doing at Rethink Learning Labs is we're both building research and using research to change the ways that teaching and learning happens. So an example, the 2 weeks before that, I was doing professional development with teachers and data collection. So the first week I actually taught a group of teachers. The second week I led the data collection. And we went in, and my whole philosophy about working with math teachers is to let them think about the math they teach, which is in this case, middle school math, like an adult. So we take in problems that are exactly the math that they teach, but that twist it just a little bit to make it interesting for adults to talk about it. And in the process of making it interesting for them to talk about it, they have a reason to learn to think with manipulatives and representations. They have a reason to talk about their students. They have a reason to talk about their curriculum. They have a reason to work with each other. They have a reason to lesson plan. I mean, opening that conversation up for them just gives them all of this space to do the things they want to do. And at the end of the week that I was teaching, we talked to the teachers because they were very excited. And they were like, we spent this whole week with you and you never even told us how to teach. I was like, you're a teacher. I don't have to tell you how to teach. I just gave you an opportunity to think about math like an adult.
I love it. And that is eye-opening what they said to you.
Because it really
programmed to come into professional development and be like, okay, so let's get the curriculum out. I'm going to teach you how to teach to the kids. But they already know how to do it because they're already professionals.
Exactly. And that's where I work from. I work from, they know stuff because they're professionals. A lot of them have master's degrees. I mean, these are highly trained professionals. These are not just people off the street. And they need to be treated like professionals, but in their teacher preparation, chances are very, very good that they never had a chance to take a course that got them to dig into these ideas as an adult. And so that's one of the core things that we do. The other thing that we build into that, we build in, thinking with our presentations, we build in a sequence of things so that they explore the math and then they learn how to connect it back to their curriculum and then they learn how to apply it. So we have all of those things built in there. But the other thing that I build in that has been more controversial than you would expect is I want them to have fun. It's supposed to be playful. Oh. They're supposed to be laughing. If they're not laughing, we're doing something wrong.
You want me to be at a PD and have fun?
I know. Crazy, isn't it?
I thank you. First of all, thank you. Because these are the PDs that we should have been having, that we need to have. And this is what I heard. Conversation, so we're no longer isolated about how we're thinking about teaching, how we're actually teaching. Oh, you use that? Oh, let me think about that. I'm looking at sticky notes coming out. We're putting stuff in our phones. We're videotaping how things are happening because now we have a community. You can't teach isolated.
Right.
You have to have a community. Then the second thing I heard from that is intentional teaching.
Right.
And learning, where the way you look at the math problem as an adult, especially when you're working with middle or high schoolers, that's how they're looking at it. They may not be as complex and the critical thinking skills may not be all the way where the adult is, but that's where they're going. And they will then buy in to listen and learn.
Right.
Because now they understand, okay, so you're telling me, if I to one of my students, he was like, the teacher said, he said, I couldn't get square root. But he's one of my football boys. He said, but the teacher came in and said, okay, we're going to look at stadiums. And they set up. And the teacher had learned how to have fun and gave everybody a different stadium, a laptop, and some other stuff they had. And he said, we had to do the square root. And to throw somebody off, he gave one group the Navy ship that, the planes can fly off and hooks because that's like 10 football fields, actually. And a whole week, and they were engaged. And he's like, now I get it. He's like, I understand measurements. He's like, because before, he's like, I was just looking at him like, right, when am I going to use this?
Right. Well, and it brings up a whole question that I think the field, the country, maybe the world needs to have, which is, what does it mean to know math in the 21st century? We all carry supercomputers in our pockets now. So why on earth are we focusing so hard on calculation when everybody carries a calculator with them? What should students know and be able to do? They should be able to reason about math. They should be able to tell when it makes sense. They should be able to communicate about math. All of these kinds of things, not just calculate, because honestly, I use a calculator most of the time too. And it's not that I can't add. It's that it's just going to be faster and easier if I'm adding larger numbers.
And it's the convenience. And like, I love how you said that, like, these babies, they have phones in their hands. I have watched these kids take their parents' phone and figure out how to get to YouTube and sit there and watch a little YouTube video. And I'm sitting there going, what just happened?
Yeah, 3 and 4-year-olds know how to do that.
Yes, and I was like, because I literally was sitting there like, did the mama have it on there? And I guess my friend, the mom, she was looking at me. She was like, no. She said she has figured out. She knows, she has like visual representation of what the YouTube symbol is, and knows to push it. And she's like, it's only on kids stuff now because I'm a mom. She's like, so. She just slides until she sees a video she likes, or she just pushes it and lets it play. That is a great question. And I think everyone should be thinking about it. And then we need to be answering it real quick.
Mm-hmm. I think that the other place that we really need to answer that question is around computer science. Like, everybody has to live with computers. So is it okay for only the students who want to know how to be programmers to understand computer science? And what does it mean to understand computer science? Because if we're going to have smart doorbells and smart fridges, we better get a little bit smarter about the way that we work with our technology. And
Wow.
these are just the kinds of questions that are out there that we need to tackle.
Because it's going into a different realm. Because even I jumped on LinkedIn last night, and Miami-Dade College has a whole AI certificate, and then they have a scholarship. I was like, can I qualify? Like, how do I get into this? And that's what we're seeing. So your questions are not only valid, but we need to hurry up. And so this is where Rethink Learning Lab comes in, because I heard you say, we don't just ask the questions, then we just go ahead and start teaching it. Yep. And we start preparing the educators. Now, what's next for you in education? What's next in Rethink Learning Lab? What do we do next? And I see it as both sides. I see it as us preparing educators. Mm-hmm. And when we prepare educators, I always look at the two levels. And people go, oh, that's crazy. Don't do that. I look at 10 years and under, and I look at the 10 years and over. Mm-hmm. Because there are some distinct differences on how you approach the two groups. I am the 10 years and over group. And so I know within my group, we have I'm not going to do nothing new group. Yep. And then in the same group, we also have, okay, bring it on. People like me, like, what are we doing? How do I get the kids ready? And then we have the skeptics who you can win over, but it's going to take a moment. Right. So what's next for education, and how do we get to the next level? Because the kids are ready. It's us. Right. I think, I've been thinking a lot about this summer. How do we help teachers move forward, particularly in the areas related to emerging technologies, emerging content areas, because there's getting to be more and more of that teachers are expected to teach. And it's not fair or reasonable to expect that teachers are going to go out and become experts on everything new that happens, right? That's just, nobody can do that. So what we have to do is build a culture among teachers where they embrace design thinking, they embrace inquiry, they embrace these kinds of things, and they learn right beside their students, which is such a shift from the authoritative model where the teacher is, the sage on the stage, to use the overused term. They can't really even be the guide on the side, right? Because they don't know either. They need to be a co-learner with them. And so we're trying to think of different ways that we can engage teachers in learning with their students around cybersecurity, around AI, around things like that. And at the same time, trying to think about how can we push on the status quo in the content areas so that we can move away from testing and, again, move more towards collaborations, creativity, critical thinking, the 4 C's. Because that's what kids need. And if you give them those tools, they can tackle anything. Anything. It's so crazy. It's like where I'm from, you've heard it before. You're preaching to the choir. And then I go, but how do we get it? How do we get it to the masses? Like, where's the mass choir that I need to be preaching to? And so then that's my question. And you may or may not have an answer. This is part of the new season. We have what we call Controversial Corner. Mm-hmm. That is the new controversy. Like, how do we get the school board members? How do we get government officials? How do we get the people who supposedly think they know what we need and they control the money? Right. How do we get them to listen that we are behind the 8 ball? We know how to catch up. But you're going to have to pay people. Right. You're going to have to stop trying to lie about the history. You're going to have to stop trying to make our students feel like they can't learn by downgrading or downplaying all of the things. And like I said, you may or may not know the answer. You may be like, I'm thinking about it too. Yeah. But the controversy right now is like, you're not listening to the professional educators. And everybody knows at the end of the day, we work hard, we love our jobs, but more importantly, we want to see the students succeed. We want to see society be successful.
Right. Right. I mean, I think working from a place, one of my mentors at UGA was Denise Spangler, who's now the dean there. And I've heard her publicly say, and she said to me personally multiple times, one of the most important lessons, which is no teacher gets up in the morning and thinks, how can I go ruin my kids' days? How can I go ruin my kids? No teacher, however good, however bad, whatever you think of them, there is no teacher on earth who gets up and thinks that at the beginning of the day. And I think that if you work from that place as your starting place, it gives you all kinds of other places to go. And I think the professionalization of teaching is definitely part of it. We need to get the people who control the money to listen to both teachers and educational researchers. We actually know what we're doing. They listen to business people. They listen to economists. They listen to rich people, but they don't listen to the people who are actually in the trenches and the people who study the people in the trenches. And if we could get them to listen to us more, I think that would be really helpful. I was at dinner the other night, so I just stepped off of a charter school board. And so they were having a farewell dinner with those of us who had just rolled off the board. And somebody brought up testing at the dinner. And this was a dinner that had 2 bankers, an insurance person, a real estate person, the executive director of the school, and we were the people who were there. 2 of these things are not like the other ones, but it's okay. But they brought up testing, and I was like, the only thing that we know that testing shows is students' social economic status. The one thing it's guaranteed to show us is who is poor and who's not poor. And I don't think we need a test to tell us that. We already know that. We can look at their zip code and see that. And I heard what one of the bankers was like, but accountability. I'm like, the only thing that we can reliably tell from tests is SES. And they were just like,
what accountability did he want?
People think that if students do better, it means that teachers did better. And nobody is taking into account that if you start with students who are less affluent, you're starting from the perspective of these tests in a deficit situation. I mean, this goes back to the whole notion of learning loss. The kids who lost learning are the kids who are poorer. Right. And they did not lose anything. They gained a lot. They just didn't gain the things that the test measures. And as somebody who cares deeply about math in particular, but STEM in general, I look at what the test measured and I'm like, did anybody stop and even look at what this test is measuring? Because if you look at the problems, it's not even necessarily things that we care about.
No, and it's not just in math, it's in English also.
Yeah.
I'll never forget my first year teaching middle school. And the word was yacht, YACHT. I was in Newport News, Virginia. So Virginia Beach is down the street. You know, we are surrounded by water, Tidewater, Virginia. And you're not supposed to talk about the test afterwards. So my kids were like, look. And the boy, he said, I'm going to spell something and can you put it on the board? And I was like, okay, because I don't know, this is kind of tricky with middle schoolers. So I put it on the board and he said, what is that? And my entire class said, yeah, what's that? And I said, well, how do you pronounce it? And they said, yache. Because you do pronounce it yache.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing the way we taught you, phonics and whole language.
Exactly.
And then I said, okay. I said, well, and then I said, boat, cruise ship, the Navy ships we see, the yachts, and then explained it. And they were like my whole class, like you could feel the energy get sucked out of the room. Yep. Because they were like, if we actually knew what that word was, we would have been able to answer the question.
My first year as a faculty member, I was at Ohio University, which is in rural Ohio. And I was working with a group of teachers, and the ones who were talking were like, I want to say the first grade teachers, second grade teachers, littles. And they were like, our students had a question on the test today that asked them what kind of road goes through town. And the answer was supposed to be, I think, a 4-lane divided highway. They're like, we live in rural Ohio. The road that goes through town is 1 lane in each direction. So every one of our kids got that wrong.
Yeah, I'm from a rural country in Virginia. We have one stoplight.
Exactly.
So we don't have, I'm with them. Like it's the one lane.
Right.
Oh my goodness. And so, and therein lies, we're not making it up. Like we literally can go pull a test.
Mm-hmm.
It was something else I was reading, and pets. Depending on where you grow up and the type of family you have determines where your pet is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have one pet in the house. My pet, my dog is in the house. Had a house dog. We also had 3 dogs outside. So they had, and we're rural Virginia. So, my dad has built has a dog house, and there's no fence. Like we didn't have, they weren't tied up. Everybody knew the dogs, and they kind of stayed, on our land because they had a nice big yard, big backyard. They walked us to the bus. Walked back. They were waiting when we got off the bus. Walked us back home. And so when you start giving students stories about dogs being in the house or dogs going on the trip with you, because they're looking at you like the dog ain't going. Like, I don't. What?
Yeah. Why would you do that?
Right. And as a grown up, and even now in the world, we do see that much more often. Actually, here Publix just said, don't bring your dogs in here no more. Like Publix is like, we are done with you bringing your dogs in the store. The answer is no. Unless it's a service dog. Like you literally can't, like you have to be a legit service dog with the little vest on, because those are the ones that people don't touch. We know better than to mess with your dog.
Right.
Please don't bring your little chihuahuas in your purses. And so I appreciate researchers and other educators, even in the midst of people that and y'all respect each other because you're sitting on the board for the school, you still spoke up, was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Until people start dissecting these tests to figure out what they're measuring, they're just never going to understand that they're not measuring the things. One of my former colleagues did research on the Texas test several years ago, and the only predictor he could find for math performance was biology performance, which means it wasn't even measuring math. It was measuring something else entirely.
Yes. And everybody doesn't take biology.
Right. So if you don't take biology before you take the math test, too bad for you.
Oh my goodness. That's a whole nother TED Talk. On testing. Okay. I have a couple more questions and we get ready to wrap up. Thank you so much. Here it is. Okay. As a concierge, my friends started calling me this more than a couple of years ago. The whole calendar just fell off. Because I have friends who were new parents and they were not in education, so they would call me and say, they want to put my kid in speech, or they keep saying he needs this, or we did this and we don't know what they're talking about. I'm like, send me what they said. Or I'm flying out there. Like, let me see what's going on. Or I was like, no, call so-and-so and so and tell them I sent you. So as I was being an education concierge, a lot of people sometimes are like, what is a concierge? And I said, basically back in the day in the hotel, you would come in and it would be a high-end hotel and you would say, hey, I'm here and I would like to go to this 5-star restaurant, this Michelin restaurant, or I would like these Broadway tickets, or I want Beyonce tickets, like whatever you need. And so my question to you, when you go to a hotel, if you're not worried about money, where would the hotel be and what would you ask the concierge to get? Where would you go? What restaurant or what Broadway show would you ask them to get you tickets for?
Oh, I would go to New Zealand, I think, because it's just a beautiful country from what I can see in movies. And I think what we've learned, my husband and I have learned over the past several years, is that paying for experiences is always the best. And so I think I would ask them to get me whatever the best behind the scenes experience would be. So like we did a behind the scenes at the San Diego Zoo, and it was amazing. Amazing. We got to feed a rhinoceros, and we got to see a baby cheetah up close, and it was amazing. So I would ask them for that kind of experience.
I love that. And I always love to ask this question. 6 seasons, no one has ever given the same answer. And I love it because it gives us and the audience more insight into who you are as a person. Because I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm like, yeah, you're a researcher at heart. 100%. And then you give us something new. Because one, I didn't know that you could do that at the zoo. But now I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go somewhere. But like, yes, I would like behind the scenes access. How much? I'm gonna just put it on the bill. We'll pay it.
Yep. We've done behind the scenes at Disney, which is fantastic. We did. We went on a bike tour of Australia. Fantastic. I highly recommend any kind of guided behind the scenes, off the beaten track thing. Totally worth it.
You have changed how I'm gonna do my vacations now.
Yeah,
I love it.
Going back to me being a researcher, so part of the magic of Disney is the psychology that they put into it. I just love learning about the Disney psychology, and they have a whole behind the scenes tour that like shows you go away green and how this works and how that works and the psychology behind all of this stuff, so that you pay attention to what they want you to pay attention to and not the other things. And loved every minute of it.
Well, I'm trying to remember what movie. It was a Will Smith movie. Oh my goodness. He played like I don't know what he was like, he got people money.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a scene where they're going to the football game and they're like betting, but the whole day they had strategically placed the number of the player or whatever in different places. So the person that they were targeting, just simple things. He was seeing it all day. And when you said it, I was like, yeah, Disney, they have a whole team behind that, like you said.
Yep.
And now I'm like, and I'm not big on Disney. Like, I'm not one of those people. I live in Florida, but I know there are people who go to Disney like all the time. Yeah. But now,
my husband is not big on amusement parks in general, but he loved the behind the scenes stuff too. So I think, if you have people in your life who want to go to amusement parks and that's not your thing, check and see if there's a behind the scenes tour.
Yes. Okay. Now look, I'm gonna have to research that tonight. I love that. Okay. So here we go. Now, hold on, wait. Let me move up. Okay. I added a question, and it was not on your thing, but I thought about it when we were talking. And I love to do this because I'm a reader and I'm trying to improve. What was the last book you read that changed your way of thinking or changed your life?
Huh.
I know.
I mean, I think everything that I read except I read some stuff that I just call brain candy, and brain candy is never going to change my life. But I think everything else kind of does. I mean, what I want to say is it's certainly not the last thing I read that changed my life, but is Octavia Butler. The most recent thing I read by her is Lilith's Brood. And I love going into her world because it's so different from my world, and it's so beautiful, and it's just so rich, and it's just amazing. And I remember, I don't remember the name of it. It's her book with the lady who keeps going back in time and then forward in time. I didn't want to read that because I was like, what am I possibly going to have in common with this character? I don't live in Chicago. I have never known a slave, because when she goes back in time, she's a slave. She's on a plantation. I'm like, I have nothing in common with her. And I got into that book, and it was just amazing. Amazing.
I'm trying to think, is it Kindred?
It may be Kindred. I think so.
Because that is a book I read in high school. Hold on. Let me look. Yes, Kindred. That's the one.
Yeah.
Carolina Soa. Dawn, Bloodchild and Other Stories, Wild Seed, Legend.
Yep.
Kindred. And I remember reading that book and putting it down and was like, ooh. Because I'm from rural Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, we out here, we going past the Dismal Swamp, going to see my sister. She was in college at the time at Hampton. And I was like, this is a little too real right now. Hold on.
Yeah.
And my mom would be like, you need to finish the book. You need to finish the book. And I said, Mom, it's a lot. But yes, and she literally was that author that would take you with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize you're like, oh, I'm in a whole other world. Like, I'm sitting here reading this book, but if you look up, you're like, I am in wherever Octavia Butler has me.
Exactly. And that we lost her young is a shame, because I'm like, I want more. I want more fledgling. I want to know what happens after fledgling.
Okay, because it's just, I mean, okay. See, that's my ELA going. Now we're going to stay focused. Okay, focus. Okay, so now, this is my last two questions. Here's the last one. I would like to know, how can we make learning math fun? Because I feel that when they get to middle school, we have snatched the creativity from them in every possible way. I don't know whether snatched or squashed I think squashed is the right word.
It's squashed. We are all math people. Every human is born trying to make sense of patterns. Every one of us. And that's what math fundamentally is, right? Is making sense of patterns. And when we bring kids into the K-12 school system, we crush that so that people no longer think that they're math people. If I was in charge of the world, I would make it so that first and second grade were nothing but playing with numbers, so that students could feel very confident with how big numbers are, how small numbers are, what numbers come next, how they relate to each other, that 16 is 10 more than 6, that you can combine 5 and 3 or 4 and 4 or 2 and 6 to make 8. They would just know all of this, because if they left second grade fluent with just how numbers work, think of all the other things they could do. The work I do is a lot of it's with fractions and proportions. And if they don't understand numbers, they're not going to understand that a fraction is a number. And they're not going to understand that a proportion isn't a number. It's a comparison. You can't plot a proportion on a number line. You can only plot it on a 2-dimensional graph or a double number line. You have to have 2 dimensions, because it's a comparison of two things in which every single relationship between those two things is exactly the same. But you have to understand numbers in order to even start to understand that.
We just had a whole math lesson, because I was sitting here like, nobody ever said that to me like that. And I don't like fractions. I don't like proportions, and I don't like decimals. I don't want to move this little period thing. It's a period. Let it stay right there. And so it was so difficult. But listening to what you just said, I'm sitting here like, I probably would have been able to do this in school, because that made complete sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once you understand how numbers work, that we have a base 10 number system, it all just makes so much more sense. But we don't give students the time to develop that. We're so worried about them knowing how to add and subtract it in 1 minute math, right? There's the mad minute thing, that we're not giving them the time to play.
And that's essential, because we do that in ELA. We call it creative spelling.
Mm-hmm.
And then we let you create stories. And yes, I like what you said. By the time you get to third grade, we are saying, okay, so let's use the things that we've learned. So I should see a little less creative spelling. I should see now more correct spelling.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, yeah, we should be doing the same thing with math. Okay, so now we're going to get some concrete. Okay, abstract and concrete. All right, let's bring it in together.
Right.
I agree with that. So I'm going to say this, and I know people are like, but Nina, I don't care. That's why you see homeschools popping up. That's why you'll see people like me who are creating micro schools and learning pods, because we want students to have a love of learning, and we want them to develop that love of learning that will then keep them going. And then right now, in our public charter parochial schools, we are squashing it, and the kids are turning to hate school, but in that, they're turning to hate learning. And we don't need citizens like that. We don't want citizens that don't want to learn, because we have some of those, and look at where they are taking us now.
Well, as we move forward, if you think about it, it's going to become more and more important that we all love to learn, because the things that are going to keep the economy running, the things that are going to save the world, they're all about loving to learn and continuing to learn and keep asking questions and pursuing those questions. They're not about being able to multiply 7 times 7. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn how to multiply. I mean, that's great. But you need to know what to do with the numbers after you learn to multiply. You need to be able to think about what can I use this for that's going to be useful. I remember a few years ago, we had some stairs built up to the second floor of our garage. And I said something to the contractor. I was like, oh, I just assumed that you went and you bought like a pre-made stair thing. He's like, no, I had to actually use math to figure out the size of every one of those steps. And I'm like, I need you to go talk to every 10th grader, because everybody in Geometry and Algebra 2 needs to know that this is where you're going to use this stuff. You're going to need this stuff, even if you're just going to build houses.
So, and I'm glad you said geometry, because I wanted to wrap up with that, because so I would have been that student. You would have brought the guy in. I'm listening to him, great presentations. I get it. And then I would have been like, I'm going to be a nurse. I don't care. If he messes up my house, I'm suing. I'm going to go get a new house. And then you'll have to be like, Benita.
Yeah, I mean, nurses have to deal with ratios all the time in order to choose dosing. It turns out that one of the weed out courses for nursing school is dosing, and it's because students don't understand proportions. Basic middle school math.
That they did not get a great teacher like you have trained, and that come through the learning lab to say, hey, think about how you're teaching. How are you going to do it? Think about it as an adult. And now go back into the classroom as the professional you are to get the kids ready.
Right.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. This is how we wrap up. Thank you so much. First, you let us know, how can our family of TEC contact you, connect with you, and say, hey, Benita, I listened to that podcast, and I need her to come in here to this classroom, to this school, to this district, to my micro school, and teach these teachers. And so how do they get in contact with you on social media or your website?
So you can always contact me at chandra.orrill at rethinklearning.com. We have a brand new website going up that's also rethinklearning.com that covers the whole suite of Rethink Learning projects, including Rethink Learning Labs. And you can find us in LinkedIn through Rethink Learning, and you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I am always happy to partner with schools and to think about how to improve teaching and learning, curriculum, really anything that has to do with the STEM side of the house, we're super interested in doing. So working with students, working with teachers, working with informal education, we want to create learning spaces for everybody.
And that's essential. And that's where we're going. Learning spaces for everyone. So this is how we wrap up here. I am a good old country girl. We always end like this. I'm a good old country girl that went to Little Shallow Baptist Church in Emporia, Virginia, on Otterdam Road. Shout out. Hey, y'all. And the pastor of the church, he would open the doors of the church, but the guest pastor, that's you. You get to send everybody away on their way, however you would like them to be sent. Some people sang, rap. I think I did have somebody do a prayer. Leave us with some inspirational quotes or however you would like to. Before you do that, I want to say thank you so much It's not every day we get math people on here. First of all. And then second of all, thank you for the dedication to ensuring that educators are truly educators, which means they have intentional professional development to be intentional about the teaching that they're doing in the classroom, because that's the only way. That is the only way that we're going to improve education. So Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me. I wanted to leave with a quote from one of the, I think one of the most powerful minds in education, Jerome Bruner, who passed away a few years ago at like 102 or something years old. He was around for a long time, and he's super important because he helped think about how people learn, how to develop curriculum to help them learn, how to support teachers in learning. He was one of the first people who tried to do this applied learning kind of stuff, and he was doing it in the late 60s, which was very, very early to have academics working with teachers trying to improve teaching and learning. And he wrote several books, and they're all worth reading. But he said, I have this quote on my computer, so I see it every day, that says, understanding something in one way does not preclude understanding it in other ways. And that's how I try to think about things.
Repeat that one more time so we can get that.
Understanding something in one way does not preclude understanding it in other ways.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, thank you for coming to season 6 with Chandra Orrill. I said it right 2 times, y'all.
Yes.
And understanding what she does in the education atmosphere with Rethink Learning Labs. This is essential. I want you to connect with her. Educators, leaders, educational leaders in the classroom, parents that are listening, and you're like, you know what? Let me stop talking about these teachers and let me go ahead and tell them to call Chandra. Okay, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to be about it. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.